For Hansel and Gretel, a modern retelling parfait, far part onen. The House of Hunger. In a small house at the edge of town, where the forest begins its dark whisper, there lived a family held together by love and torn apart by fear. Hansel, age 12, and his sister Gretel, age 10, had learned to make themselves small enough to fit in the corners, small enough not to be noticed when their stepmother's mood turned sharp as winter frost. The evening began like so many others, with the sound of wind howling outside and a nearly empty pot scraping against the stove. Their stepmother, Anna, stood in the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed, her face tight with bitterness. "This is it," she said, her voice like ice cracking. "This is all we have left. Half a loaf of bread, some wilted vegetables. How are we supposed to survive on this?" Their father sat at the table, his shoulders slumped, his eyes unable to meet anyone's gaze. "I'm looking for work every day, Anna. Every single day. Nobody's hiring. The factory won't reopen until spring, if it reopens at all. Your children eat like wolves?" Anna spat. "They eat and give nothing back. Just 2 more mouths draining us dry." Gretel's small voice came from the corner. "I'm not very hungry, Papa." Pa Hansel, protective as always, added quickly, "Me neither. We can share one bowl." Anna laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Oh, how noble. How touching. But it doesn't change the math, does it? 4 people. Not enough food, winter coming. Anna. Please." Their father said weakly. "Their children. Their weights around our necks, pulling us under. And you're too weak to admit it." She stormed from the room, and the door to the bedroom slammed so hard the walls shook. In the silence that followed, their father spoke softly. "Don't listen to her, my loves. We'll be all right. We always find a way." But his voice carried no conviction, and the children heard what lived beneath his words. Doubt, like rot in the foundation of a house. That night, Hansel and Gretel lay in their small room, unable to sleep. Through the thin walls, they could hear their parents arguing. Their stepmother's voice was insistent, relentless. "There's a way," she said. "You know there's a way." "I won't do it," their father replied. "I won't even discuss it." "Then you're choosing them over me, over us. You're choosing to watch all 4 of us starve instead of saving 2. They're my children. And I'm your wife. Or have you forgotten? Tomorrow, we take them deep into the forest, and we leave them there. People will think they wandered off, got lost. It's kinder than watching them die slowly here." A long, terrible silence followed. Then, in a voice so broken it barely sounded human, their father whispered, "God forgive me." In the darkness of their room, Hansel sat up, his heart pounding. Beside him, Gretel whispered, "Hansel, did you hear that? Less. She wants to. Papa wouldn't really." "Don't worry," Hansel said, trying to sound brave even as fear gripped his chest. "I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." His hand found something on the small table beside Gretel's bed. The bracelet. Their grandmother's gift, given to Gretel 1 month before she died. Tiny glass beads, missangas strung on elastic. each one catching whatever light it could find. Gretel wore it every day, touching it when she missed their grandmother most. Hansel's fingers trembled as he lifted it. "Gretel," he whispered, "I need to borrow something. I'll give it back. I promise I'll give it back. I'm RTWO." The path of light, morning, came too quickly. Their stepmother woke them with false cheerfulness, announcing a family walk to gather mushrooms and firewood. "Won't that be nice?" she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Their father couldn't look at them as they prepared to leave. He moved like a sleepwalker, going through motions he couldn't believe he was performing. They walked into the forest, deeper and deeper, as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Birds sang in the canopy above, unaware of the tragedy unfolding below. Hansel walked at the rear, his hand in his pocket, fingers working quickly. Every few steps, he would let a bead slip through his fingers and fall to the ground. The misangas caught the morning light as they tumbled into the grass and dirt. Each one a breadcrumb, each one a way home. 30 beads on the bracelet, 30 chances. "Hansel," his stepmother snapped, turning to glare at him. "Why do you keep stopping?" "Keep up! Sorry," he said. "My shoe was untied." Gretel glanced back at him, her eyes questioning. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Trust me," he whispered back. They walked for hours. The trees grew thicker, older, their branches woven into a ceiling that barely let through the sun. This was the part of the forest where people didn't go, where the stories started, where children disappeared in fairy tales that weren't really fairy tales at all. Finally, their father stopped in a small clearing. His voice was hollow as he said, "This is Ba. This is a good spot. You children wait here. We'll scout ahead for mushrooms." "Can't we come with you?" Gretel asked, though she already knew the answer. "No," their stepmother said firmly. "You'll make too much noise and scare away the deer. Stay here. Don't move. We'll be back soon." "How soon?" Hansel asked, his eyes meeting his father's. Their father couldn't hold his gaze. "Soon," he whispered, then turned and walked away. The children watched as their parents disappeared into the trees. They listened as the footsteps faded. They waited in the oppressive silence that followed, the forest pressing in around them like water. After a long moment, Gretel spoke, her voice shaking. "They're not coming back, are they?" "No," Hansel said simply. "I'm scared." "Hansel." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the last few beads. "Don't be. Look. I took the beads from your bracelet. Grandmother's beads. I dropped them all the way here. When the moon rises, they'll shine. We'll be able to follow them home." Gretel looked at the beads in his palm, torn between hope and loss. "You broke grandmother's bracelet. I'll fix it," he promised. "I'll string every bead back on. But first, we need to survive." They waited as the sun crawled across the sky and finally began its descent. They waited as the forest changed from welcoming to ominous, as the friendly sounds of day gave way to the hunting sounds of night. They waited until the moon rose, full and bright, filtering its silver light through the canopy. and when that light touched the forest floor, the missangas came alive. Each bead glowed like a tiny star fallen to earth, a trail of light leading back through the darkness, back toward home. "They're beautiful," Gretel whispered, awed. "It's like grandmother is showing us the way." "Come on," Hansel said, taking her hand. "Stay close to me." It took them most of the night, but they followed every glowing bead back through the forest, picking each one up as they went. They walked through the fear, through the darkness, through the primal terror of being small things in a vast and dangerous world. By dawn, they stood outside their own house, the bracelet whole again in Hansel's pocket, and something harder than fear in their hearts. The door opened suddenly, and their father stood there, his face a mask of shock. "Hansel! Gretel! Oh, thank God! Thank God!" He rushed forward and pulled them into his arms, sobbing. "We got lost. We couldn't find you. I thought. From the doorway their stepmother watched, her voice cold. "How did you find your way back?" Hansel met her gaze, defiant. "Why followed the path?" Anna's eyes narrowed, and in that moment, the children knew this wasn't over. Not by a long way. Paper. Techari. The sweetness that betrays for a week, an uneasy truce settled over the house. The stepmother watched the children like a hawk, her eyes always calculating, always planning. The father moved like a ghost, unable to look at his own reflection, carrying the weight of what he'd almost done. And the children waited, knowing something worse was coming, feeling it in the air, like the pressure before a storm. On the 8th day, their stepmother's voice rang out, bright and artificial. "Children! We're going on another walk today. I've heard there are berry bushes on the other side of the forest." "No, thank you," Gretel said flatly. "It wasn't a request. Get your shoes on, both of you, now." This time, as they prepared to leave, the stepmother stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching everything. When Hansel reached for his jacket, she stepped forward. "Empty your pockets," she commanded. "What?" Hansel said. "You heard me empty them. Both of you." Reluctantly, they turned out their pockets. A few coins, a smooth stone Gretel had found. Nothing useful. "The bracelet too, Gretel?" Anna said. Gretel's hand flew to her wrist protectively. "No, it was grandmother's. You'll get it back when we return. Leave it here." Their father made a weak protest. "Anna, that's not necessary. Stay out of this," she snapped, as they walked toward the door. Hansel's eyes swept the kitchen desperately, searching for anything that might save them. There, on the counter, he saw a jar of sugar candy, bright pink and white, the kind their grandmother used to give them. When the stepmother turned her head for just a moment, he palmed a handful and slipped them into his sock. This time, they walked even deeper into the forest, to places where the trees were so old, they seemed to have faces in their bark, where gnarled roots rose from the earth like arthritic fingers, where the silence felt like a living thing, watching and waiting and holding its breath. Hansel whispered to Gretel as they walked, "I have candy. I'm leaving pieces. We'll follow them back. Will it work?" Gretel asked, her voice small. It has to, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Hours passed. The sun moved overhead, though they could barely see it through the dense canopy. Finally, in a place so remote it felt like the world had forgotten it existed, their father stopped. This is far enough, he said, his voice barely audible. Wait here, children, their stepmother said. Don't move. Gretel looked at her with eyes too old for her 10 years. You said that last time. Anna's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. And yet here we are again. This time, there was no pretense. They turned and walked away quickly, their footsteps fading into the vast indifference of the forest. The children stood alone, and the silence pressed down on them like a physical weight. They waited for moonrise, hope and dread warring in their chests. But when that pale light finally filtered through the trees, Hansel's heart sank like a stone into dark water. No, he whispered. No, no, no. What's wrong? Gretel asked, though part of her already knew. The candy. It's gone. All of it. They searched frantically, pushing through underbrush, checking every spot where Hansel remembered dropping a piece. But there was nothing. Ants had found the sugar. Birds and small creatures had devoured it. The forest had erased their path as if they had never walked it at all. Gretel's voice broke as she began to cry. What do we do now? Hansel tried to be brave, tried to be the big brother she needed. We walk. We pick a direction and we walk. We'll find a road, a house, something. I want to go home, Gretel sobbed. I know. Me too. Come on. Stay with me. They walked all night, stumbling through the darkness, through their fear, through hunger that gnawed at their bellies like an animal with sharp teeth. They walked until their legs shook, until their feet bled, until Gretel could barely stand. By the time dawn broke gray and cold through the trees, they had nothing left. Tu faux fait peur four, the woman who remembered wrong, Hansel, Gretel whispered, her voice weak. I need to rest. Just a little further, he pleaded, though he didn't know where they were going, didn't know if there was anything to find. Please, Gretel. Just a little. Then he heard it. Faint and distant, but unmistakable, the sound of wind chimes singing in the breeze. Wet, he said, grabbing Gretel's arm. Do you hear that? She lifted her head, listening. What is it? One chimes. There must be a house! With renewed energy born of desperation, they pushed through the final wall of trees. And there it was, a small cabin, old but well kept, with flower boxes in the windows and wind chimes singing from the porch. Smoke rose from the chimney, carrying the scent of something baking. Someone was home. Hansel helped Gretel up the wooden steps and knocked on the door. Hello? He called out. Is anyone there? Please. We need help. From inside came the sound of shuffling footsteps. A lock turned. The door opened. The woman who stood there was small and bent, her hair white as winter, her eyes filmed with age. She wore a cardigan covered in flower pins, and her hands shook as she reached out toward them. But on her face was an expression of such pure, uncomplicated joy that the children couldn't speak. Thomas, she said, her voice trembling. Michael. Oh, my boys, you came. You finally came, Gretel whispered to Hansel. Who is Thomas? But the old woman didn't hear. She was already reaching for them, pulling them inside. Come in. Come in. Look at you. So tall now. I made your favorite cookies. I always keep some ready. I knew you'd visit someday. The cabin was warm and cluttered with photographs. Two boys smiled from every frame, growing from children to teenagers to young men. The old woman moved through the rooms with purpose, talking continuously, her words wandering like lost birds from topic to topic, from decade to decade. I tell your mother every day, she said, setting out bowls of soup and thick slices of bread. I say, they'll come soon. They're busy with their lives, but they'll come. She doesn't believe me, but I know my boys. You're here now, aren't you? That's what matters. Hansel opened his mouth to correct her, to explain, but something stopped him. He looked at the joy on her face, at the way her hands trembled as she served them, at the photographs covering every surface. Photographs of two men who had never come. Yes, he said gently. We're here. Michael, you always were the quiet one, she said, smiling at Gretel. And Thomas, still protecting your little brother. Some things never change. Gretel started to speak, but Hansel gently touched her arm. She looked at him, confused, and he shook his head slightly. Should we tell her? Gretel whispered when the old woman went to the kitchen. Look at her, Hansel whispered back. When's the last time someone looked that happy? So they stayed. They let her call them by names that weren't theirs. They ate her cookies and listened to her stories about childhoods they'd never lived. They played checkers by the fire and admired her garden and told her yes, they remembered the treehouse, though they'd never seen it. They gave her the afternoon she'd been waiting years to have. As evening fell, the old woman began to nod off in her chair by the fire, a smile on her weathered face. Will you stay tonight? She asked drowsily. Your rooms are ready. I keep them ready? Yes, Hansel said. We'll stay. Good, she murmured, her eyes closing. That's good. I'm so happy. So happy you're here. Her breathing became slow and regular, peaceful in sleep. The children sat quietly, watching the fire burn low, feeling the weight of what they'd done. The lie they'd told, the kindness they'd given, the strange mercy of letting someone believe what they needed to believe. Hansel. Gretel whispered, What do we do? We'll let her sleep, he said. And in the morning, we'll figure out how to get home. They found the two bedrooms, exactly as the old woman had said. Made up fresh. Waiting. Photographs of Thomas and Michael on every nightstand. The children climbed into beds, meant for ghosts, and tried to sleep, tried not to think about their own father. Wondered if he was searching for them, wondered if he regretted what he'd done. Parfait. The morning of peace, the children woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, in that space between sleep and waking, Gretel forgot where they were. Forgot the forest, the abandonment, the fear. Then she remembered, and sat up quickly. Hansel, she called softly. Are you awake? Yes, came his voice from the other room. They dressed and made their way to the main room of the cabin. Good morning, ma'am, Gretel began. We should probably. Then she stopped. The words died in her throat. The old woman sat on the bench outside, visible through the window. She faced the sunrise, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. On her lap was a photo album, open to pictures of two smiling boys. Her hands rested gently on the pages. Her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful. More than peaceful, she looked complete. Hansel, Gretel called, her voice small. Hansel, come here. He came running, and together they approached the bench. Hansel gently touched the old woman's hand. It was cold. She, Gretel whispered. Yes, Hansel said quietly. She's gone. Gretel began to cry. We should have told her. We should have told her we weren't really her grandsons. The Hansel put his arm around his sister. Maybe. Or maybe we gave her what she needed most. Maybe she went to sleep believing her boys had finally come home. The wind chimes sang in the breeze. A gentle song that seemed like a benediction. They went back inside and found breakfast laid out on the kitchen table. Toast and jam, 2 glasses of juice, a note in shaky handwriting that said, for my boys. Love, Grandma. She had prepared it before going outside to watch the sunrise, before sitting down with her photo album, before closing her eyes for the last time. We need to call someone, Hansel said, his voice thick with emotion. The police. An ambulance. There's a phone, Gretel said, pointing to the wall. On the wall. Hansel picked up the old rotary phone, his hand shaking. Gretel, what's our number? Papa made us memorize it. Do you remember? Together they recited it, and Hansel dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a click, and their father's voice, rough and exhausted. Hello, Papa, Hansel said. There was a sound like all the air leaving their father's lungs at once. Hansel? Hansel! Is that you? Where are you? Are you safe? Is Gretel with you? We're both safe, Papa. We found a cabin in the forest. We need you to come get us. Their father was sobbing now, great gasping sobs that shook his voice. Thank God. Thank God. Tell me where you are. I'll come right now. I've been searching for 2 days. I haven't slept. I thought I'd lost you. I thought I'd killed you. Gretel took the phone from her brother. Papa, there's an old woman here. She helped us. She gave us food and a place to sleep. But she died, Papa. Last night. In her sleep. She's outside. I'll call the police from here. Their father said immediately. They'll meet me there. Just tell me exactly where you are. Stay put. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming. I'm coming right now. Faire sex. The road home. They waited on the porch, keeping vigil with the old woman. They didn't know her name. They didn't know her real grandsons, Thomas and Michael, or why they never came. But they knew she had saved them. In her way. She had given them warmth and food and kindness when they had nothing left. She had given them one more night of childhood before the world demanded they grow up too fast. Do you think her real grandsons know? Gretel asked quietly. That she's gone. Someone will tell them, Hansel said. They'll come then. After. That's sad. Yeah, Hansel agreed. It is. In the distance, they heard the sound of an engine. It grew closer, winding through the forest roads. Then a car came into view, driving faster than was safe on the rough path. It skidded to a stop, and their father burst from the driver's seat. Hansel! Gretel! He shouted, running toward them. They ran to meet him, and he caught them both in his arms, pulling them so close they could barely breathe. He was crying, great hiving sobs that shook his entire body. I'm sorry, he said over and over. I'm so sorry. What I did, what I let happen, I'll never forgive myself. Never. Where's Anna? Hansel asked, his voice muffled against his father's shoulder. Their father pulled back, looking at them with red-rimmed eyes. Gone. I told her to leave. She's gone. Behind them, more vehicles arrived. Police cars. An ambulance. Officers stepped out, professional and calm, and began asking questions. The children told their story, leaving out only the part about being abandoned. They said they'd gotten lost on a family walk. The officers examined the cabin, called the coroner, made their notes and reports. Through it all, their father held his children's hands as if they might disappear if he let go, as if he could rewind time and undo his terrible choice through the strength of his grip alone. Finally, they were allowed to leave. The children climbed into the back seat of their father's car, and he started the engine. As they pulled away, Gretel looked back at the cabin, at the wind chimes still singing on the porch, at the bench where a lonely old woman had found peace at last. Papa, Gretel said as they drove. What happens now? We'll go home, their father said firmly. The three of us. We figure it out. Together. Will there be enough food? Hansel asked. I'll make sure there's enough, their father replied. I'll work 3 jobs if I have to. I'll sell everything we own if necessary. I will never, ever let anyone tell me you're not worth fighting for. Not again. Gretel was quiet for a moment, then said softly, Papa, the lady in the cabin, we lied to her. She thought we were her grandsons, and we pretended to be. Was that wrong? Their father considered this, his hands tight on the steering wheel. I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes kindness and truth don't line up perfectly. You gave a lonely old woman peace at the end of her life. That's not nothing. That's not wrong. She called me Thomas, Hansel said. And Gretel was Michael. Their father's voice was soft. Then Thomas and Michael are lucky boys. Even if they never knew it, they had someone who loved them that much. Epilogue. The light that remains. The house was different when they returned. Quieter. The air itself seemed lighter, without the stepmother's presence, as if a dark cloud had lifted. Their father made soup while the children sat at the table, clean and fed and warm. Outside, night was falling, but inside there was light. Hansel fixed it, Papa, Gretel said, holding up her wrist. The bracelet was there, every bead accounted for, strung back together with care. Their father looked at it, then at his son. Your grandmother would be proud of you both. She always said you were stronger than you looked." "Papa," Hansel said suddenly, "what if we hadn't found that cabin? What if the old woman hadn't been there?" Their father stopped stirring the soup. He turned to face his children, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "But you did find it, and you're here, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know you're wanted. You're loved. You're home." He crossed the kitchen and pulled them both into an embrace. They stayed like that for a long moment. The three of them holding on to each other, holding on to this second chance they'd been given. In the forest, miles away, the old woman's cabin stood quiet under the stars. Soon her real grandsons would come, summoned by police and guilt, and the news that comes too late. They would sort through her things and find the breakfast laid out for boys who weren't them. They would wonder, perhaps, at the small muddy footprints on her porch, the 2 glasses washed and left to dry by the sink. They would hold her photo album and realize, with shame that came years too late, that she had been waiting for them until the very end. But they would never know the whole story. They would never know about 2 lost children who gave their grandmother, because that's what she'd become in those final hours. The gift she'd been waiting for. They would never know that she had died happy, believing her boys had finally come home. That night, as Gretel drifted off to sleep in her own bed, she whispered to her brother in the darkness, "Hansel, do you think we'll forget her?" "No," he whispered back. "I don't think we ever will." And they didn't. In the years that followed, as they grew into adults and had children of their own, they would tell the story about the forest and the fear and the old woman who mistook them for her grandsons. They would teach their children to be kind to the elderly, to call their grandparents, to never take for granted those who love them. They would speak her name, even though they never knew it, and in the speaking, keep her memory alive. Because that's what we do with the people who save us. We carry them forward. We let them live on in the better choices we make, the kindness we extend, the way we show up for those who need us most. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, Gretel would swear she could hear wind chimes in the distance, singing their gentle song. She would touch the bracelet on her wrist, the one Hansel had broken and mended, and she would remember. She would remember that even in the darkest forest, there can be light. Even in the cruelest circumstances, there can be kindness. Even when you're lost and alone and certain that no one is coming to save you. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, you'll find someone who mistakes you for the person they've been waiting for, and in that mistake, discover the truest kind of love. The love that asks for nothing. The love that gives everything. The love that lasts beyond the final heartbeat, echoing forward through time like the sweet, persistent song of wind chimes dancing in the breeze. And somewhere, in a place beyond the forest, perhaps an old woman smiles, surrounded at last by all the grandchildren she ever loved, whether they came to visit or not. Perhaps she knows, somehow, that two of them did come. That in her final night, she wasn't alone. That her boys came home at last, even if they arrived wearing different faces. Perhaps that's enough. Perhaps that's more than enough. Perhaps that's everything. Ian Deave, reading time. Approximately 60 minutes at a natural, measured pace suitable for audiobook narration.